Hey, so this is Derek, and I want to keep you updated on the editing process that I'm going through. I've had this book out on pre-order for a little while. This is actually something I started last year, and so I made a video recently on my 5-step editing process. But I want to make kind of a more advanced step 2 phase. So what happened was about a week ago, I finished my shitty rough draft. So a shitty rough draft is when you finish all the way through to the end, and you actually write the end. So you kind of know what happens in the last scene, but it's still going to be not great. And some of this was already formatted a little bit, but it's messy because I put some of it out last year, but a lot of it isn't. So when I finish the shitty rough draft, which is just basically what happens in the actual story, and then I know what happens, then I have to start going through and revising it. So I spent this week probably about 20 hours going through my first really edit or revision process. So like I had gotten down to the end, I was just drafting. So I was focused on, doing the writing sprints and getting the words out and getting the story down, which is actually the hardest part for me. I'm much more comfortable editing, and I wanted to keep track of how long it actually took me to edit. So this took me about, like I said, 20 hours to go through. So about an hour per chapter, and that's for like I had the basic bare bones content of what actually happens, but I need to go through and edit it and clean it up. So on the one hand, I caught a couple, probably like 100 typos. I edited, I fixed some things up, I removed some notes. I'm basically trying to just make it a clean rough draft, which it kind of is now. So a clean rough draft is just, it's almost good enough for someone to actually go through and read it. Like it's kind of a whole story that you could read all the way through in one go, and there's not giant passages of notes or disconnected sections or anything. So that's what I've been going through in the first big revision process. I've just trying to been making it readable. I mean, it's basically there. Someone could read this and get a little bit of enjoyment out of it. It's not completely finished. There's still some holes or gaps or scenes that need to be improved, but that's also partly what I'm doing is just going through and making notes on what I need to fix. So I've gone through it once as like a whole thing, so I really know what happens. I fixed a lot of things. I've also added a lot of comments. So now that I have a clean rough draft, I'm not sure if you can see. So over here, all this red stuff in here, I'm basically commenting on the details. So like what actually happens here, or fix this, or change this, or stuff like, am I spelling the character's name the same way every time? What are they wearing? What is their eye color? I have to make sure I'm keeping track of details, and also like the backstory. What happens? Sometimes I just comment like, fix this, make this stronger, stuff like that. And I also still have a list of scenes and notes of some other really good stuff that I had in mind. So this is partly the consistency phase. So I've gone through from my shitty rough draft, I've made it readable and fixed a lot of stuff, but it's not really perfect next. I actually have this book out on pre-order, and I'm pretty slow, like I'm up against a deadline. I tend to work better under pressure anyway. So I have about 48 hours now to finish this book and get it uploaded in time for my pre-order. I wasn't actually sure that I was gonna make it when I finished the shitty rough draft because I know I still had a lot of work to do. But I have gone through and I'm pretty confident now. The last couple chapters, these aren't actually chapters. I'm gonna have to delete these. But by the time I reach the end, I've gotten through a lot of good stuff. The last chapter especially has a lot of work I need to do. But I basically know what happens. I just need to like add some stuff and then go through one pass of editing, and then the rest of the book needs a final proofread. So I should be able to finish at this point in another hopefully 10 or 15 hours or so if I work really hard the next couple of days. I'll be able to, at this point I'm just going through, like I'll have to check all of those comments and just tweak things, add a little bit of detail, add a couple sentences here or there, check for consistency and make sure I'm saying the same thing in the right places and saying the same thing and not using, weird character names or anything. So consistency is a big part of it. And I will go through again and check for final typos or problems like that. I'm not completely worried if if the people who got pre-orders, they're probably on my list anyway. So as long as it's good enough that they can read through it all and get and appreciate the story, I'm not too worried about 5 or 10 typos that they slip through. Those will get fixed. Before I do, like I'll probably leave it on pre-order. I may not announce it again, depending on how confident I am, when it's up on pre-order, I may announce to my list again to get more pre-order sales, or I'll just wait a week. What you can do is after the pre-order version goes out, if I hadn't finished, what I could have done is stopped a little bit early and then said, if this went out by mistake and you got the unfinished version, make sure you get, the final 3 chapters. I'll send them to you later. I'd rather not do that if I don't have to. I have done that in the past, and readers aren't happy with it. It's not the end of the world, and it's better, I think, to do that than cancel your pre-orders and lose all those sales. And if you do that, you'll lose your pre-order privileges for a year. And I've already done that twice. So at this point, also, one of the things that I've realized is that the book ends kind of where I say it ends. So before I might have said like, oh, there's one extra chapter, or make sure you get the last chapter, or whatever. Readers won't know there's another chapter unless I announce it. So I don't like, rather than saying, I think I'm going to add another chapter to this and make it a different ending, I don't have to announce that to people. I could just say this is the end of the book, sign up to get book 2 or whatever. And then before I publish book 2, I may decide there's an extra chapter that really needs to go in book 1, and I could arrange it that way. So that's something I'm still learning. It's difficult sometimes to know where the end is until you get there. This isn't actually the ending that I had planned on, not exactly. So I've changed my ending and saved some of the big stuff that happens for book 2. But anyway, I've gotten to the point, even though this is really kind of a rushed process, and this won't happen for everybody. For a lot of people, if you don't have a clear outline of your story, what can happen is you finish your shitty rough draft, and then you need months to edit it because you need to add in whole scenes or remove whole chapters, and making those decisions is really hard or painful. I don't have to do that stuff because by the time I get to the end, I got stuck in the middle and I had to invent a bunch of new stuff. But by the time I get to the last couple chapters, I know pretty clearly what happens. So at this point, I know exactly what happens. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit. And that's the other thing I'm going to be doing is now I have a clean rough draft, which means it's okay. It's not super, but it's okay. So in the next 48 hours, basically, I have to make the book amazing. And basically the way that I do that is I go through and I try to like increase everything, increase the drama, increase the scenery, the settings, the wow factor, increase the costumes and the weaponry and the conflict between characters. So it's basically just like upping the stakes, making what I have. Maybe I have a simple scene that's just a little boring. And I actually had that problem when I was reading through, this first rough draft, the shitty rough draft. There's a bunch of chapters in here where there's something happening in every chapter. There's some conflict and something changes, but there's also a lot of, they're going shopping or they're sitting down for coffee and they're just talking about stuff, which isn't great. I mean, ideally you want more conflict, or you can have those slow periods right before something explodes. And I do have some of that. You don't want it just to be all fighting all the time. You want some like restful, slow scenes to contrast against the exciting action scenes. So I'm not too worried about the slow sections. But if you do have slow sections, you want to make sure you're still upping the interest by adding mystery or intrigue or internal conflict or scenery. Like this, at least this setting for this scene is just so amazing. It's okay that they're just talking about kind of boring things or backstory. So that's all some of the stuff I'm going to be doing. Now I'm kind of in my final edit. I had actually written up here on editing somewhere, these are all the categories that I want to get into when I launch. We'll see kind of how that goes. I have some notes for the description. I'm going to need to fix that a lot because it's not super yet. But up here I had, when I edit a book, it was basically the what, why, and how. So the first shitty rough draft was just what actually happens. I'm finished that. I have the why, the motivators, the backstory, the information dumps. I finished a lot of that also in the shitty rough draft. How, what does it look like? I made notes on that stuff, but it needs to be a little bit better. So actually, this stage, I really should do again. The first paragraphs and the ending hooks and the conclusion. I made notes like in my first paragraphs, or especially in my ending paragraphs. I made notes like, end this chapter stronger, or I made notes of what that would actually look like. I need to go through and really make sure those entries and ending hooks of scenes and chapters are as good as they can be. And my conclusion is pretty good, but I mean, that's definitely something. The last chapter especially hasn't been edited as much as the rest of the book. So I'm going to go through fixing everything up. And then I'll probably need to go through the last 2 or 3 chapters, several more times to really get it up as high quality as the first 5 chapters, which have really been edited much better at this point. I am running on a deadline now, so this is going to be, going into a couple possibly sleepless nights with lots of caffeine and just trying to get through and get it finished. It is not ideally the way to write a novel. On the other hand, I find that if I don't have, like, even though it's stressful to do it this way, if I don't have a pre-order deadline, a really hard deadline, then I just won't do the work. Like, I can get it done if I have the deadline, and getting it done a little bit imperfectly or a little bit rushed is better than spending, a year on it and just never really getting it done. I don't believe that a novel written slowly and calmly is better than one written under pressure. I think this will probably be a better novel because I wrote it quickly over the space of a couple months than it would be if I had just stretched it out over a year or 2 years. And a lot of people get stuck in the editing process and they're always adding, they're always fixing things. I don't think that's a way to a better quality novel, because you're a different person. Every 6 months when you take a look at it again, you come at it after you've read other books. You have different influences, you have different impulses. So you're going to end up with a messier novel that's less satisfying. So I'm okay with writing quickly and writing to a deadline, even though it may seem, oops, this is kind of freezing up, even though it may seem a little bit messy to do it this way. And I'm not necessarily recommending that you do it this way, but I did want to record how long it takes me to edit a novel. So this is like I said, the shitty rough draft phase took me about 20 hours to get to where I am. Hopefully I'll do another 10 or 15 hours to read through it again from my clean rough draft to a final publishable copy. And then I'll need to edit up. I'll edit it quickly for ebook. It won't have to be amazing, but I'll just clean it up and make a clean ebook copy that can go out for those who ordered the pre-order copy. And then later I'll get a really high quality print designed. I won't design the ebook, the print interior formatting yet, because probably what's going to happen is when I put out this, even though it'll be a very clean draft, there'll probably be a couple typos, or there may be some things that I really wanted to add in or fix up, like maybe some really crucial backstory stuff. Sometimes I have things like that, like the readers don't know what's missing, but I always feel like it could be a better story if I added in this other thing. So sometimes I might want to go back through once it's out there and I can see how the reviews are coming in and I have some more space. I may feel like going back in and fixing up a few things and just making the story even better. And once that's really finalized, maybe a month later, then I'll put out the print version. Anyway, so this could really take, 40 hours to edit altogether. I'll make another video keeping track of the time. And then later when I want to do like a complete from start to scratch, how long does it take to outline and draft and edit a book? Like the entire time it takes to write a book. My guess would be like 100 hours, 100, maybe 200 hours from start to finish to write a book. But that's also something like if I could figure out how to do that all faster and spend less time on it, that's a big win. If you can cut your time in half, that's basically doubling your income from book sales. So those are things, that's kind of why I'm really focused on not only improving my process, but also getting faster at all these stages. Because like I said, I do think it's possible to write a better quality book faster. And if you want to be a full-time writer, then you do need to get comfortable doing all the things. You may not want to edit your own books. I have friends who just do the rough draft, the shitty rough draft. Like they do that and they send it straight to an editor, because by the time they finish that draft, it's good enough, it's ready for editing, and they can go on to writing the next book. So you have to find a process that works for you. You may want to work with an editor full-time. If you are an editor, you may be more interested in doing the editing yourself and using beta readers or a street team to catch some typos for you. I have other articles about whether or not you need a professional editor, and that's not really what this video is about, but hopefully seeing my process helps you a little bit. Thanks, bye-bye.